Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at a game that I played against none other than International Master Eric Rosen. Now, as many of you probably know on YouTube, Eric Rosen is very famous for the many videos that he has done on the Stafford Gambit. Now, he is considered the foremost expert, and in today's video, we're going to look at a game that I played against him where I crushed Eric. I destroyed the Stafford Gambit, and I proved once and for all that it's simply not a playable opening. So for anybody who struggled against it, you are going to enjoy this video immensely. Alright, so the game starts out with e4. Eric plays e5, knight f3, and now he plays the move knight f6. I play knight takes e5, and here he plays knight c6. This, of course, is the start of the Stafford Gambit. Black can, of course, play much more traditionally with pawn to d6, knight to f3, and knight takes e4. This is a classic Petrov or Russian variation. It's worth noting there is a basic tactic here where if black takes on e4 after queen to e2 attacking the knight, when black moves the knight away, you have knight c6 check, and you do win the queen here. If black blocks with the queen, you take the queen. If black plays bishop e7, you go knight takes queen on d8. So after knight takes e5, knight c6 is played, you take back. Now black takes with the d7 pawn here, and you'll notice that black is down a pawn in the center, but black has very quick development here with the two bishops. Also ideas like knight g4 and knight takes e4. So I play knight c3 here, which is a move that guards the pawn. Now this is a very important move. You could play a much more natural move like pawn to d3, but after d3 bishop to c5, you can run into trouble very quickly. One mistake that people play here quite frequently is they see that black is threatening to go knight g4, putting pressure on this pawn on f2, and so they play this move pawn to h3, stopping knight g4. Should be great for white. Not so fast. After pawn to h3, black can play the very exciting sacrifice with knight takes pawn, pawn takes knight, and now bishop takes pawn here next to the king. If you capture the bishop, you lose your queen on d1. So you have to go king to e2 to protect the queen. And now after black plays queen to h4, it's very, very dangerous. Black is starting to win the pawn on e4. There's bishop e6, rook d8. You can also castle very quickly. And white has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces on their original starting squares. So it's very, very dangerous. Another line would be to play bishop to e2 here, trying to stop knight g4, but black can still play knight g4 anyway, because after bishop takes knight, queen to h4, if you castle, black can play bishop takes bishop, and very quickly white's in trouble. If you play queen e1, black can castle here. He has ideas like bishop d6 to attack the pawn at h2, rook a8, f5. All of black's pieces are very, very well placed here. Now white is still better with very precise play, but for someone who's newer to the game, it would be very easy to lose control and lose instantly. So therefore, I play knight c3 to guard the pawn this way. Now when Eric goes bishop c5, I can actually play this move pawn to h3. What it does, it obviously stops black from putting a piece on g4 like the knight or the bishop. Additionally, unlike the other variation here, if black tries to play knight takes e4, it's not a pawn capturing, it's just a clean knight. So you no longer have ideas like bishop f2 because there's the pawn in the way and I just capture, and I have 2 extra pieces. I win the game very easily. Additionally, if you try to play queen e7 here, pinning the knight, white just plays queen to e2, breaking the pin, and after black moves, say the bishop, you just go knight c3, or if black plays a move like f5, you can take the bishop, but just to illustrate it, even knight c3 here, and you have 1, 2, 3 minor pieces. Black has 2 minor pieces. You simply have an extra knight on the board, and you should win this game. So black cannot play knight takes e4. He cannot play knight to g4. So what can black do here? Now, it's worth noting that in this position, black would like to play something like queen d4, threatening a checkmate in 1 towards the pawn on f2 with the queen and the bishop while attacking the pawn on e4. But if you play queen d4 here, white can very simply go queen to f3. I guard the pawn on e4. I also guard the pawn on f2 as well, so black cannot capture either of these pawns. And after black say castles, you can play pawn to d3, intending to develop the bishop to g5 or e3 or d2. And after rook to e8, you can simply go bishop to e2 with the idea of castling here. And white is simply up a pawn here in the center of the board. You are going to finish your development. Black really doesn't have a whole lot going on. If black tries to play bishop b4, another move pinning the knight here, you simply go bishop d2, guarding the knight. And once again, after rook e8, you can castle queenside, or you can play bishop e2 and castle kingside. Either way works, and white is simply winning. So here Eric tries to play b5 here, another move that's being aggressive. He wants to play b4 here, removing the knight from the c3 square where it guards this pawn on e4. But after b5, I play queen to f3 here, trying to guard both these pawns on e4 and f2. And now if black plays b4, you simply go knight a4, attacking the bishop, and the knight cannot capture the pawn because then you capture the knight on e4. When black moves the bishop away, again, you can simply play a move like d3 here, followed by bishop e2 and castles, and you simply have an extra pawn. You have 8 pawns, whereas black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So b4 doesn't really do a whole lot, so Eric tries to castle. Now here I play the move d3. Again, maybe not the absolute best move. Computer actually likes just bishop e2 first, but I figured if I go bishop e2, maybe he has some b4 idea and maybe some rook e8, something like that, where there's some pressure. And if I play d3 here, I still can always go bishop e2 and castle kingside, but I can also just develop this dark square bishop and or potentially castle queenside. So Eric goes bishop d4, and now I play bishop to e3 here. And the reasoning behind this move is quite simple. When we do the count, you see 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. You see 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. White has an extra pawn here. White is going to be able to complete his development very soon, and white should win the game. So already here in my game against Eric, I'm much better and I should win. Now this, you guys, is why you have to remember to be very precise in order to defeat this very dubious and unacceptable gambit that Eric Rosen has made oh so popular. So after bishop e3, Eric plays queen to d6. I decide to trade the bishop since I have an extra pawn. We trade. I go queen e3, offering to trade the queens, of course, not to mention the extra pawn. Not even on top of having an extra pawn, black also has these double stacked pawns on c7 and c6, which means effectively I'm up 2 pawns. I have a big white center here. Black cannot really contest it because he'd need a pawn on d5 or f5, and so it's all going very, very well. Eric plays queen to b4 because he doesn't want to trade the queens. I play rook b1 here. Now the reason that I played rook b1 in the game is that I can castle queenside here, but after a move like queen a5, black has some threats. b4 is a big threat. Say I play like h4. After b4 here attacking the knight, when I move the knight, I lose the pawn on a2. So it's very, very scary here if I castle queenside. Additionally, if I play king b1, which is another move instead of h4, black can now again play bishop to e6 with the idea of b4, and there's a lot of pressure here on the queen side, and my king is a little bit loose. So I play a move like a3 after b4 takes. Now black can even use the open b file, maybe use this open a file as well, and there's a lot of pressure. Meanwhile, of all these pieces over here on the king side, they're simply not in play. So I don't castle. Instead, I decide to play rook b1. Eric plays rook e8, and now I go bishop e2 with the intention of castling my king to the king side. You'll also note that here, after say a move like bishop e6 and castles, for example, black does not really have pieces on the king side. He can't put a knight on g4. I have all these pawns that I can push if I desperately need to, and there's just no attack over on this side of the board. You can't really push the pawns. King is very safe, and so once again, white is just much better. So Eric plays a5 here, and now I decide to castle kingside. Eric plays a4, and now I go a3, an important move. If I play a random quiet move like rook to e1, for example, it's a little bit dubious because now black can play a3, undermining my pawn on b2. If I take the pawn, I lose the knight. If I push the pawn, I lose the knight as well. And if I don't push the pawn, say I move a bishop, then I simply lose this pawn on b2, and now this a file is wide open. Black can even capture this pawn, and black is now better here. So you do have to be a little bit careful. So I play a3 here, which prevents black from pushing the pawn. Additionally, the pawns support each other, and the pawn on b2 still protects knight, and now black simply has to move the queen. Eric goes queen to d6 here, and now I play bishop to f3, just a move maybe intending to play d4, maybe e5 ideas, maybe just rook e1 with e5, and then I open up the scope, and the bishop can eye the pawn on c6. So he plays knight to d7. I play d4, creating more of a center. Again, I want to play e5 so the bishop can see the pawn on c6. He goes knight to b6. Now I play e5, opening up the diagonal. Eric plays queen to g6, and now I play queen to e4. Now the reasoning behind queen e4, even though it might not be the best move, is quite simple. I have an extra pawn here. With an extra pawn, I'm always happy to trade down pieces. Also, additionally, these pawns are very weak on this open diagonal now. The bishop can attack the pawn, attack the rooks, and knight also can capture this pawn on b5, so black is in a lot of trouble. Additionally, if I play a move like rook e1, black potentially has a move like bishop takes h3. I cannot capture the bishop because then my king on g1 is in check. So I go queen to e4. Eric plays bishop b7. We trade the queens, and now I go knight to e4, trying to create a nice outpost for the knight on c5 as well. Eric plays bishop e6. I go knight c5, trying to win the pawn on c6, and Eric plays bishop d5. Here we trade the bishops, and now I go c3, creating a classic connect 4, and black is effectively lost here because you can't really do anything with these queenside pawns. The pawn on a4 can't move forward. Pawn on b5 can't move forward either. Pawns on c7 and c6, well, they're just stuck because I have a knight in front of them. So Eric plays rook a d8. I go pawn to f4, creating more space and also consolidating my center. Plays f6, and now I play this move g3. Now the reasoning behind playing this move g3 is very simple. If I play a quiet waiting move like rook to f2, black can try to break the center up here by going pawn to g5, attacking this pawn on f4. If I take the pawn on g5, black actually captures towards the center, and now I have these double pawns on the g file, so my extra pawn is not as effective. So instead I play g3 here just to consolidate and prepare for if black plays pawn to g5. Eric goes knight to e3. Now I play rook to f2. He goes knight c4, and now I play rook e1, just protecting the pawn in the center. Maybe I'll push it, maybe I'll double stack and then open up the lane. Who knows? Eric plays king f7. I go knight to d3 here with the idea of trying to reroute my knight to b4 to attack this pawn on c6. It's worth noting that while the knight on c5 looks very well placed, it's not actually doing a whole lot here. So knight d3 with the idea of rerouting and going after this pawn makes some sense. Eric plays knight b6, trying to reroute his knight to d5. I go knight b4, attacking the pawn on e6. Eric plays rook e6, and now I go g4 with the idea of potentially pushing f5 and e6. Say black plays a move like knight a8. After f5 takes, rook has to go. He moves the rook, and then I check. King goes, and I capture the pawn. And with these two protected pawns here marching up the board, the rest should be very basic. So Eric plays rook h8, and now here I play king g2. It's worth noting that once again I could have played f5, and in fact I don't know why I didn't play it, but I think I thought, you know what, I can just sort of relax, take my time, and guard the pawn first. So after king g2, Eric loses his mind and plays pawn to c5, basically because he realized that I'm going to be pushing f5 soon. Black could try to play f5 here, but after knight d3 with the idea of going back to c5 and pushing my pawn to e6, it still is pretty hopeless. But Eric instead decides to play pawn to c5. So I decide to take the pawn. Why not? It's a free pawn. What's the big deal? Eric goes knight to d7, and now I play knight d3, simply protecting both of my pawns on the e5 and c5 squares. Eric plays rook c6 here, and now I take on f6, takes back, and I go rook fe2, stacking the two towers on the open e file. Eric plays rook d8 here, and now I go knight to b4. Now this maybe is not the cleanest way to win, but it leads to a situation where black is simply paralyzed and will run out of moves. So after knight b4, Eric takes, and now I go rook d1, which is the whole point behind playing knight to b4, because now black is simply stuck. The knight on d7 is pinned. If you ever move it, I chop the rook on d8. You also can never move the king closer. Say my rook was on f2. You can maybe move the king close so that at some point you could move the knight and trade the rooks. But here with my rook on e2, you can't even bring the king closer because the rook on e2 covers this open file. So effectively in this position, black is lost. Eric plays f5. I go g5 here, simply waiting for Eric to make a move. Plays c6, and now I go h4, and he plays rook c4. King f8, of course, is a waiting move that is possible, but after rook e d2, king to e7, I can play rook to d6 here. Black cannot move either the rook because you lose the knight, or move the knight because you lose the rook. So you can't move either of these pieces, and if you play rook c4, I can simply go knight takes pawn, forking the king and the rook. And after rook takes knight, rook takes rook, white is simply winning. I have a pawn and a rook for the knight. Pawn on g6 is hanging. I have rook c7 trading off, and all roads lead to Rome. So Eric plays rook to c4. Now I go king g3, simply guarding the pawn. Here Eric plays c5. Now again, nothing really that Eric can do here. If he plays rook to e4, trying to bring the king closer, I simply trade the rooks and take the pawn on c6, attacking the rook on d8. If you move the rook away, I just capture the knight on d7, and if you don't move the rook, well, I'm just going to gobble and take the rook with my knight, and you lose no matter what. So Eric decides to play c5 here, hoping that I'll miss the right move. But after pawn to c5, I now go knight to c6 here, attacking the rook. Knight, of course, is under pressure as well, and it's simply hopeless. Eric proceeds to play b4, but after knight takes rook, Eric Rosen resigns the game, and I win. One sample continuation of how it could have gone is king to f8, rook takes knight, pawn takes pawn, and now I go rook f7 check, knight guards the rook, and after king g8, I have rook e8, creating the classic ladder checkmate, and that would be all she wrote. So after knight to c6, b4, knight takes d8, Eric resigns the game here. I win this very clean game in the Stafford Gambit, and as I said before, this really is a line that simply refutes the entire gambit. Black does not have many alternatives here. Black really does need to develop quickly. If he doesn't develop quickly with bishop c5, say he plays a move like bishop e7, for example, you can just go bishop e2, castles, rook e8, and then d3, developing your bishop. Great pawn center, and you win the game. And after h3 here, very important to remember to bring the knight and the pawn, because you always have this queen f3 move here, defending against queen d4, and even after b5 playing queen f3, even castles queen f3 for that matter. All these ideas with d3, bishop e2, and castles, you will reach the middle game up a pawn, and you should win the game if you have good middle game and end game technique. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video on how to defeat the Stafford Gambit. It is obviously a gambit. It's a little bit dubious, but not everyone knows how to beat it. So I think with this video, I've showed you guys how you should be able to win every single time against it, so you should never have to worry about it or have nightmares about this when you have to face it in the future. I know like Hafu, who played in PogChamps, she was very concerned about it, but with the setup of knight c3 and h3, you will never have to worry about it again, and you should win almost every game where you face it. On that note, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below if you have not, and we'll be back with some more great content in the very near future. Hope you guys enjoy it. See you soon. Bye.